Here's what happens. When this wakes up, all of this shuts down right up here. When this gets really, when you've got that fight or flight thing going right here, you got to shut that. It's like getting the ball thrown at your face. You know, you just can't, like when people get stressed out that I sponsor in AA, they'll say, Chris, I just drank. Like, I said, what happened right before that? They go, oh, I was going to see my wife or my boss or my PA, something, you know, there's some kind of stress usually that goes on. And they said, it just happened. And I go, I believe you. Okay, I believe that, you know, they just thought about it. I just thought about it and I went and did it. And I said, yeah. You know, people look at you and go, you're weak. And you're whatever. And they go, no, I just had brain trauma. Okay? This is brain trauma right here. Okay? Then, that's just from the effects of alcohol and drugs. So 2 years, every time that you don't use though, and you can calm the brain down, what happens is this shrinks up, it'll just shrink up a little bit more. It gets a little smaller so that the next time it wakes up, the pleasure center isn't as big, and it doesn't that crazy feeling that you get, that really uncomfortable. And we're going to talk about all the symptoms that go along with it. It's called post-acute withdrawal, is what you're actually feeling whenever the pleasure center wakes up. Okay? Acute withdrawal is the 3 to 30 days to go through the initial physical withdrawal of your drug. This is post-acute withdrawal. Post means after the physical withdrawal. This is 2 years, depending on your type of drug, how long you were using, and whatever, okay? So I never knew this. I always thought I was doing something wrong when I thought about using. And my sponsor said to me, he was a recovery therapist, and he said, he'd been doing it for 30 years, and he said, well, didn't they tell you in treatment about brain trauma? And I was like, no. And he goes, oh my God, what'd they tell you to do when you got stressed out? Go to more meetings. You know, do more. Do whatever. And he goes, oh, so they asked you to get more stressed out. Write more. I can't write, I can't even think. You know, like, so he taught me to learn how to calm this part of the brain down. He said, we got to calm this down first so you can reconnect with the thinking part of your brain, the emotional regulation part of your brain, so that you can make better decisions. To tell yourself to like think like this is to like, clearly when you're like overwhelmed, is to like be in a fire and tell yourself just to be calm. It's not going to happen. Okay, so we have to learn how to do this. I was never taught that until I started working with my sponsor, and he was a recovery therapist too. So I was like, oh my God, I'm not crazy. I thought I was crazy. Okay, then if you throw PTSD on top of that, or other things like if you really have depression, sometimes people don't know that they have other psychological issues, like that they've been self-medicating, like depression, or severe attention deficit disorder, or PTSD, or bipolar disorder. They've just been medicating themselves, right? So when you quit using, it takes a little while to quit using to see what you actually have sometimes. PTSD, everybody, like, PTSD means that like you have like flashbacks, right? You have a hard time with stress. That everybody heard of PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, if you've been in combat, if you've been anything like that or whatever. Okay, but it can also be like if you've been in prison or jail. They call it post-incarceration syndrome. When you get out, always checking your back, hypervigilance. Never feeling really safe, never, you know, like getting flashbacks, getting like loud noises. I've been in jail all the time. I hate loud doors. Okay? Just hate it. Hate those loud noises and just whatever. Like, and don't come up behind me and grab me like this. You know, no. Like, I will turn around and get big, right? Okay, like, okay. I grew up physically, sexually traumatized by my dad for like 18 years. Someone told me once, you grew up in a concentration camp, but soldiers supposed to love the guard, Chris. You're physically, sexually violated by your father for all those years. He was crazy when he was drunk and made you all play Russian roulette with a gun with one bullet in it. You know, he was nuts, right, when he drank. And like, you know that word now? He would say, come over here now. That's when you knew you were really in trouble. And I remember that was Dave Sever that said that to me. Said, you need to come over here now. And I turned around and I said, she said, what? I mean, I was up against the wall like this, and it was like, oh, hit a wound, right? I said, and it was like that instantly, because I was already upset, and then they said that word now. So PTSD means that you have triggers like that, things that can like, from your past. And PTSD, what happens is that the amygdala on the outside of your brain, this neocortex here, what happens is the amygdala, they produce this chemical called acetylcholine. Okay, acetylcholine breaks down adrenaline and helps you like be able to assess whether or not is this threat real or not, right? You know, somebody being upset with me and saying, we need to talk right now. I'm not going to die from that today, right? Like spinning a gun playing Russian roulette. It's not the same threat, okay? There's no threat to that. They're just saying, I'm upset, we need to talk. But in my brain, I'm like, I can't make that distinction because it hit that wound, right? So what happens is that the acetylcholine, when you have PTSD, if you've been in a situation long enough, the amygdala, this part of your brain, starts to shrink. And it doesn't come back. Once it shrinks, it stays that same size. It doesn't heal again because it's on the outer part of your brain, right? It's not down here in the core. The core of the brain can do a lot of really good healing. It can do a lot of things that the outer part of your brain, once it's like changed or altered, can't. It just can't heal. Some of that damage is just, and the structural changes are permanent then, okay? So if you've been in those threatening situations, what happens is that your amygdala stay that size so that when we have things that hit our wounds or like give us the fight or flight, those old triggers that we have, we get this it's called the startle response. We get startled easily. We have flashbacks. We get, we want to avoid things that remind us of that. Okay, so that's what happens with PTSD. So if you have PTSD along with this post-acute withdrawal, it makes recovery even harder. Okay, so we're going to learn some techniques as we go along in this class about when this happens, when this gets triggered, your PTSD or your post-acute withdrawal, how to recognize it, and then how to calm that part of your brain down too. Okay, so that you can manage it and move on and normalize it and not be all like, what's wrong with me? I must be crazy. You know, I went through treatment 8 times and they never told me about brain trauma, ever. And all I said, like I would come in and I'd say, I'm freaking out, I can't handle life, I want to use, I feel like I'm going crazy. All they ever said, it was like, to me, they were like 12-step Nazis. Okay? I mean, I love the 12-step program, it saved my life, right? In a lot of ways. Enhances my recovery and all that kind of stuff. It can't be the only thing in my life though. They didn't teach me how to manage my brain trauma. It wasn't until I got my sponsor, who was also a brain trauma specialist and a recovery specialist. And he was an addictionologist and he was in recovery himself, and he worked with vets who were, had been through like Vietnam and things like that. And he said, you know, you have PTSD, Chris. He goes, you grew up in a concentration camp, but I told you you're supposed to love the guard. You're like a POW. And you lived on the street. For how long? Okay. And you got post-acute withdrawal because you're a meth freak that's been using for how many years? And you started drinking and getting high at 10. If you start drinking and using before the age of 15, your brain trauma usually doubled than if you start using after the age of 15 regularly, because your brain's just not finished developing, right?
No.
Okay. So, what's that? Yeah, nobody here is stressed out, right? Yeah. Okay. So tonight was just kind of this introduction about, like, this is actually what happens to your brain, okay? And the other thing I just want to make one real quick point. When this goes back to its normal size after 2 years, you ever heard in 12-step meetings, they always talk about, like, I know I have another relapse in me, but I don't know if I have another recovery, okay? Progression of the disease means this, is that if you really are more of a type 2 person, progression of your disease means that you cannot drink and use for 25 years, but if you pick up in a very short period of time, you're not drinking and using where you left off. You're drinking and using as if you had been drinking and using for the whole 25 years. So the loss of control, the compulsion, the obsession, the tolerance, all that kind of stuff in a very short period of time gets really high, okay? As if you had been drinking and using that whole time. Because, you know, I would quit for a while, and then because I'm a type 2, like, I would quit, but in a very short period of time, it was even worse than it was before. And what happens is that because the neural pathways are already built up in the brain here, it's kind of like, you know how like if you blow up a balloon the first time, it's harder to blow it up. After the first time, it'll just blow up, right? That's what happens. The neural pathways are already built up in the pleasure center here. So if you use once, it might blow up a little bit. But if you keep using for like longer than a day or two, it just blows right up to where it was before again. So all the withdrawal symptoms, all the stressed out, all of the symptoms that you feel whenever this happens, like short-term memory problems, not being able to sleep, sleeping too much, being stressed out constantly, being totally pissed off or totally depressed, you know, all these symptoms that go along whenever this happens here, right back to where it was in no time at all. Your brain structure has changed permanently if you've crossed over into this dependence. And so we can't go back to using like we did. We might think that we can if we waited for a long time. And, you know, you have to be convinced that all the things you've tried to do to control this before aren't working if you're going to like say, I can't do that anymore. Because I don't know about how many people in your life have told you that you're an alcoholic or you're a drug addict. Does it matter? It doesn't matter if they tell you, right?
Not really.
Yeah, I mean, I had people yell, I had judges yell at me. You're a dope fiend and you're a drunk. I had a judge say that to me one time. You're a dope fiend and a drunk, Chris. And I wasn't ready yet to quit. I wasn't totally convinced because I thought I could still control it. I was 18, right? And I'm like going, no, shit, I'm not ready. Okay, I'm not ready. Okay, it's like, it's when you're convinced that, you know, everything that you've tried in the past isn't going to work anymore. Well, if that doesn't work, what are you going to put in its place? And that's what we got to start figuring out in recovery, right? We got to get better equipped. But understanding that, I asked my sponsor one time, I said, what's my job the first 2 years in recovery? And he said, to heal. I don't want you to worry about getting a career, because I thought I should be getting a career. I'm feeling behind the ball. Everybody else is way ahead of me. I'm this or whatever. He said, no, no, no. You've been through trauma. You're like in the ICU, Chris. This would be like asking you to get up and run a marathon right now. Okay? You're going to stress yourself out so much that you're just going to have to go back to drinking and using, because when this wakes up, it feels like you're going to die sometimes. You get so overwhelmed, it just, because your fight or flight, this is your survival center right here. You can feel so uncomfortable, it feels like you're going to die. And that's why it's dependence, why we start feeling like we need it. When you depend on something, you feel like you need it. It doesn't feel like a choice at that point. So you ever like people like you get stressed out in recovery and they go, why are you thinking about it? It's automatic. I don't have to make myself, it's because my sister said, why are you making yourself think about that right now? And I go, I didn't make myself think about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know it's 8:15.
Oh, okay. So we're done.
Okay.
We're done. But I just wanted to let you know that this is the challenge that we're going to have, okay? And we're going to work on learning how to manage all this. Calm the brain down over the next 2 years so that you can go, I'm not crazy, and you feel successful at managing it. So the brain, if I can calm this down, this can re-engage. Right? So you're not nuts. Okay?